Able to seal him. Here's the pass. Oh, what a catch! Leaping into the air and pulling it down is T. Higgins. Burrow facing pressure. Goes over the top. Wide open is Chase. And he splits the defenders for the touchdown. Cincinnati kid, Hubbard's got a convoy, chased by Andrews, at the
30, the 20, he will score. Hooday, Bengal fans. He is Maan. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse, the heartbeat of our Cincinnati Bengals. Maan, I love the new intro. I am loving that. Updated. With some great plays from last year. Great job, our guy Eric behind the scenes putting that together. Maan, we are here, brother. Listen, the preseason is over. The roster, well, somewhat been made. We all know next Tuesday is the actual roster next Tuesday. But we have a lot to talk about. A lot of Bengal news. From the Jungle was released today. Man, it's going to be a great show. I'm very excited about tonight's show.
Yeah, a lot of news. I'm looking forward to watching that episode of that the Bengals produce. I haven't been able to watch it. I've been really busy the last few days. It's hard to work, and your phone's blowing up with all the transactions about the Bengals. I'm trying to focus today. Thank you, Bengals. Thank you, NFL.
I wonder whose fault that is, Maan. Are you trying to blame? Are you trying to blame certain people that you know? Like maybe Jake and Eric. I don't know. Yes, we were definitely. You know why, Mom? Because I don't like to admit when I'm right. I'm very humble about that. But when when the roster moves happen, like Jake the Snake Browning, I gotta remind you of who had Jake the Snake making this roster. And you like to remind me that.
You're excellent at that, but you don't like to talk about the other ones. But that's cool. It's all good. It's all good.
Who likes to talk about the other ones? Let real quick, Mom, before we get into the roster, let's really quickly just overview of that last preseason game. A game really where a lot of guys are playing for jobs, and Zach Taylor does such a good job of letting those guys get reps. We saw a lot of guys that we hadn't seen a lot of the other two games. Obviously the biggest news coming out of that is Joseph Ossai's injury with a high ankle sprain. Coach Taylor said today he really is not sure of the extent of it. I would think maybe they feel a little bit comfortable about it. The first signs are probably good if Joseph Ossai is still on this 53. However, we all know that can change by Tuesday. But Mon, any takeaways besides Yoshi's first touchdown and the nice little gritty that he hit for Jamar Chase? Any other takeaways from this game?
No, it was it was just the last preseason game. It is what you expected. Browning separated himself from Simeon. Yoshivas looked great. Ossai, the injury, I'm going to come out and say there's no reason he should have played that game. I just don't agree with that take. He was going to play a huge part. He still will play a huge part this season. His injury is a little concerning. We'll find out more tomorrow. The deal is the Bengals have to, if they put somebody on IR designation to return, he has to be on the active 53-man roster, which Ossai is. Tomorrow I expect some news. Hopefully it's good news where he stays on the roster and can play in a couple weeks. But even if he's out I think when you're on IR designation to return, it's only 4 weeks. So if that's the case, maybe Raymond Johnson comes back, maybe Gunther comes back. There'll be a pending roster move there, but we're going to talk about that 53-man roster right now.
Well, let's get right to it, Mon, and waste no time because obviously today was a very big day for the NFL and an unfortunate day for a lot of these guys, right? And you do kind of feel for them. And there's some guys on that list over to the right there that were waived today that are friends of our show. And you hate to see those things. But I feel like a lot of those guys are going to be back on this practice squad. And we'll know more about that again once Tuesday comes around and the Bengals kind of work out the rest of this. But before we get to the 53, let's kind of look at this, Mon. La'el Collins, I think interesting. The only guy that was put on PUP. Again, Osai maybe goes on the injured to return, the IR to return. But the only guy on PUP right now, La'el Collins, which that's a good sign, right? I mean, when you think about the preseason training camp and all of that meshed in one, there's a lot of big names right now that are on PUP list around the NFL. La'el Collins, again, a big player for this team, but thank God it's only one, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wilcox and a few other people started off on PUP, Awuzie, but they were cleared to quickly return. La'el Collins hasn't been cleared to completely return to full practice, and that should happen sometime this year. But he had a significant knee injury, and he will play this year, but it's going to take 6-8 more weeks potentially.
A couple guys that did come off PUP, obviously Cheeto and Wilcox, both making this 53-man roster. Of course, Cheeto is going to make it. Wilcox, a little bit of a surprise. I think you and I are going to talk about that. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but maybe not a surprise to you, but a surprise to a lot of people, especially me. Let's look at these two guys right here that were put on the injured reserve list. These are guys that are out for the season. Marvell Tell, cornerback and defensive tackle, Tuatala Pesafe. I think I said that right, hopefully. Those are the two guys that were put on the injured reserve list, so they are done for the season. The next list there, if you look below there, Maan, this is the interesting list to me, right? These are guys that are vested veterans that had contracts terminated. The good thing about these guys, Maan, is they don't go on to any type of a list where the Bengals have to maybe wait for other teams to go out and sign these guys. The Bengals can go out right now and sign them. They have become free agents because of that vested veteran tag that they have. Tight end Tanner Hudson, which I had on the 53. I think a lot of Bengal fans out there thought he should have been on the 53. I think he's the second best tight end on this roster. And I was really shocked that he didn't make it. Again, I know your argument. I'm going to let you argue it. But Tanner Hudson, a surprise cut for me. I think he will be back a Cincinnati Bengals. Sidney Jones, not really a surprise there. He struggled through the preseason. The biggest surprise is Stanley Morgan. Mon, you and I both had Stanley Morgan making this 53. I think a lot of Bengal fans did. He's a leader in the locker room. He's one of the best special teams players in the NFL. I will give you credit where credit's due, Mon, and because sometimes I just feel for you. I feel like I'm always right, and you just never get a shot at that. So I'm going to throw this out here. I will tell you, Bengal Pulse listeners, that our guy Maan has been telling me for weeks, don't be surprised if the Bengals only keep 6 receivers. Now, Maan, you had Stanley still making this 53 as a 7th guy, but you have been telling me for weeks, don't be surprised. I didn't listen to you, Maan, so I was shocked when Stanley Morgan did not make this roster, this 53. But, again, Tuesday is still a couple of days away. We'll see what happens there. Trevor Siemian, again, a guy I know you liked. You had him on your 53. Yes, he spins the ball a lot different than Jake the Snake. But Jake the Snake, I just think he brings different attributes. And I'll be honest with you, Mon. Jake the Snake should have been the backup last year. I really, truly believe he's better than Brandon Allen. So Trevor Siemian gets cut. I don't see him coming back. Trent Taylor is going to be an interesting one, along with Michael Thomas, the safety captain, that did not make this roster. I could definitely see Hudson, Morgan, Taylor, and Thomas all coming back in Bengal uniforms. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Hudson has been the darling of this preseason. All the fans love him. He's had a great preseason. He's practiced well. He's looked good in the games that he's played. I don't have anything against Tanner Hudson. I just think Mitchell Wilcox is a better player. He's been in this offense for 4 years. He knows it. He's a good special teams player also. Let's face it, the guy, he has evolved over the years. He's gotten bigger, become a better blocker. I think Mitchell Wilcox offers the Bengals a little bit more. Hudson is that, everybody on Bengal Twitter is just in love with him. He's made some great catches. He's been on 4 teams in 4 years. over his career. I don't know, in 4 years, but the Bengals would have been his fourth team. Maybe he makes it on the practice squad. I could see them offer him that spot if he's not picked up, or they can sign him to a practice squad. He's not subject to waivers. Sidney Jones, a little shocking. The Bengals, 10 defensive backs, 6 of them are either first year or second year players or rookies. 6 of the 10, very, very young in the defensive backfield. I thought Sidney Jones was going to have a really good shot of sticking there because they need that veteran depth. He didn't make it. Stanley Morgan, I fully expect him to be back on the active roster. I think they're doing some roster gymnastics with him. I think they probably already have a handshake deal, like, hey, tomorrow morning you're going to be back on the roster. Simeon, like I said last week, I really thought that they were going to go with that veteran 33-plus starts in the NFL. But they chose Jake the Snake. Hey, listen, he's a gunslinger. I'm not crazy about his arm strength, but he earned it. He beat him out. And Trent Taylor, I think we knew that when they drafted Yoshi Voss and Charlie Jones. We knew what was happening there. And Michael Thomas, I fully expect him to be on the practice squad. He's going to be in that locker room. He's a great team leader. Like I said, this is an evolving, fluid roster. Some of these players that we're talking about right now could easily be on the active roster come tomorrow or Thursday.
I agree. I think, again, we go back to Hudson real quick, and he was one of the most dynamic players, I think, in the preseason besides Yoshi. And, although he missed the one game, we've seen a lot of great plays in practice. I think this is the thing for me, Maan, is that if you're only going to keep 6 receivers and you're going to have 3 tight ends, one of those tight ends, I'm good with having a blocker in there like a Drew Sample. I'm not a huge Drew Sample guy, but I understand he's one of the best inline blockers that we have on this team. So I understand why we keep Drew Sample. But that third tight end spot, to me, has got to be another dynamic player like an Irv Smith. If something happens with Irv Smith, God forbid, you got to have another guy that can be that dynamic tight end, and it's not Mitchell Wilcox. I don't disagree with you. I think he's improved tremendously. He made a lot of big plays last year. He's definitely not the best, the second best long snapper on the team, right? We don't want to ever see that again. But I think he did make some big plays last year, and I think he's a guy that is valued by this organization. But to me, Tanner Hudson is just more of a dynamic player and gives you that kind of that 7th receiver almost. So that's my whole spiel on him. I agree with you. I think, like I said before, I think Morgan and Taylor and Thomas all make this roster. I did want to ask you, Mon, real quick, because I think as NFL fans, we watch this preseason and watch these guys break out and these young guys come in and try to win jobs. And you rarely see guys breaking into rosters like a Tanner Hudson. My question is, do we overvalue that part of it? Do we overvalue the preseason and the guys that really stand out in the preseason? Because Tanner Hudson was one that got cut. The guy you loved, Johnson, the defensive end, gets cut. And he was like PFF's 3rd highest rated pass rusher this preseason. And we got a guy in Joseph Asai that's banged up right now, but Johnson still gets cut. Do we overvalue the preseason at all?
No, I think the coaches who have turned this franchise around, they've drafted players, they've gotten us to a Super Bowl, 2 AFC Championship games. They're evaluating this film of every practice snap, and they're making some tough decisions. There's a lot of really good players on this team. Not everybody can make this team. I wanted Raymond Johnson. To me, it came down to Tuifele and him. So the Bengals go 5 defensive ends, 5 defensive tackles. Raymond Johnson, he really looked the part. We got to add some perspective to it. He wasn't playing against first teamers, but still, it doesn't matter. The guy has to play whoever's in front of him, and he dominated him. I expect Johnson potentially. I'm just throwing this out there. If Osai does go on IR designation to return, I could see Johnson back on the roster if he's not claimed by somebody else. I mentioned this on Twitter the other day. I expect 4, maybe 5 Bengals to be claimed by other teams. We'll find out in the next couple of days over that. I really expect that to happen.
It's going to be interesting. One more thing about Tanner Hudson. Eric brought this up as well. do you think the Tanner Hudson situation is kind of like the Hayden Hurst one? I mean, when we talk about guys that have been on teams for different amount of years, and remember, we were Hayden Hurst's third team on, and he was pretty damn good last year for us and got a big contract because of it. So my question to you is this maybe one of those situations? Is Hudson the next Hayden Hurst, where he's a guy that comes in and kind of just fits with this coaching staff, and he could be a breakout player for us? You don't think that's a possibility at all?
No, I don't. I think Hudson had a good preseason. I think he had a couple of good games. I have faith in the coaching staff. They think Mitchell Wilcox is more valuable to the Cincinnati Bengals. Mitchell Wilcox has been in this offense for 4 years, and I think I think the Bengals coaching staff feels safer having Wilcox on the team. I would not be surprised if Hudson gets signed to the practice squad. I get the enamoration. I get the love, and how all these fans are enamored by what he did in practice, the practice highlights in the preseason games. He looked great. Hudson really did. But the coaching staff, who I'm going to side with them, they think Wilcox is a better option. Again, these 53-man roster, it's fluid, Jake. There's hundreds and hundreds of players that are on the waiver wire right now. The Bengals can end up signing another tight end, and Mitchell Wilcox could get cut tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
we don't know. Last year they claimed 3 guys. I guarantee you the Bengals put in waiver claims, or are putting in waiver claims for players right now.
And where are we? We're 29th, I think, right? On that list?
Yeah, we're back there. There's a lot of young quarterbacks that were cut. Remember,
Yeah.
Will Greer was Bengals attempted to claim him last year, and it didn't work out. The Cowboys got him. He's available now. We'll see how that shakes out.
The Patriots cut that young kid. What was his name? Zappy. Yeah.
Zappy.
Interesting one, right? He played 4 games last year and didn't look bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's not throw in the towel on Jake the Snake. Let's look over here. These guys waived, Maan, and talk a little bit about these. Obviously, as I look through this list, the first one that stands out is Akeem Adeniji. And, Maan, I wish the guy the best, but I am so glad we don't have to watch that anymore. It's crazy because you forget that this guy, I think he started all 6 playoff games that Joe Burrow has played in. And that, to me, is incredible. I think that speaks in volumes of how good Joe Burrow is. Again, I don't mean that as a knock against Akeem Adeniji, but good Lord, Joe Burrow is so damn good, Mon. It's incredible, the offensive line that he has played behind the last 2 years. Again, last year it was pretty damn good till it got banged up. But the year before that, when we went to the Super Bowl, good God, it was just horrible. So Akeem Adeniji pops out there. Devin Asiah is a guy that you thought maybe might make this 53. He gets cut. Owen Carney, another guy that had a really good preseason. He goes. Drew Chrisman, obviously, I think, the writing was on the wall there. We kind of knew who was going to win the punting battle there. Dominique Davis had a really good preseason. Jeff Gunter, Shaka Hayward, Cedric Jackson really blew up those last 2 games. And, of course, Raymond Johnson, a guy that really stood out to everyone. I know you were heartbroken about that one. And Kwame Lassard even looked good in spots, I'll say, during the preseason. So, Mon, tell me what that list, those 26 players there, what do you take from that list? I mean, what does it look like to you? Any guys that really shock you? And then, wait, let me just say this too. A good friend of the show, Alan George, is on that list. And I think that one for me was really heartbreaking to see because we know how good of a guy he is and we know how hard of a worker he is. And I would not be shocked if Alan George is the first guy signed to this practice squad. So tell me what you think about this list, Mom.
Yeah, I expect many of them to get picked up on the practice squad. Adeniji, 50-50 to make the roster. I get it. High profile, the Super Bowl, he struggled. He struggled against elite competition. If we get Akeem Adeniji and put him on the practice squad, how many guys can say they got a tackle that has 20 starts in the NFL? I would love to have him on the practice squad. He could come in and help this team if injuries occur. Some of the other guys, Ben Brown, everybody's expecting big things from him. He was a big undrafted free agent last year. He could be on the practice squad again. Alan George, absolutely. Alan George is going to get picked up. He struggled a little bit in that last game, but Alan George has a lot of upside. Hopefully the Bengals get him back on the practice squad and he doesn't get claimed. I expect, Raymond Johnson, I really think he's going to get claimed by somebody, and I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see him back on this roster or the practice squad to continue to develop. Shaka Hayward, somebody they gave a lot of money to for an undrafted free agent. Hopefully he's on the practice squad because I think he could develop to be Joe Bocci's replacement eventually. Devin Asiasi, I had him on the roster last week. That's remember Wilcox was still on PUP at that time, but I think they got it right with Wilcox there. Asiasi, maybe he'll wind up on the practice squad. A lot of good players there. I expect a handful of them to get claimed. I think the Bengals, I like the way that the quarterback looked, the running back, Saylor, looked the other night against the Commanders. He looked really good. I could see him getting a practice squad spot. But, all in all, a lot of good talent there. Shedrick Jackson really, like you said, Jake, he really turned it on the last 2 preseason games. He has a lot of talent. Hopefully he stays on this practice squad because I think he could make the roster next year or the year after. He's got some pretty special skills, and I would like to see him hopefully signed to the Bengals practice squad.
Well, Mon, you say this all the time. You talk about this all the time on the show. When you have a Super Bowl roster, you can't keep them all. And when you have a Super Bowl roster, the reason why you have a Super Bowl roster is because of the depth of the roster. And you look at guys on this list. I mean, Akeem Adeniji started in a Super Bowl and got cut. I mean, that's how good this Bengals roster is right now. Not saying that Akeem is a great player, but my point is a lot of these guys have been successful in the NFL, and they're on this list because the Bengals roster is just loaded. We talked about it. Joe Burrow's talked about it. Everybody in the Bengals organization has talked about it, that this is probably the best roster that the Bengals have had in decades, Mon. This roster is loaded. And again, when you look at some of these names on here, I'm surprised you didn't talk about Jackson Kirkland because you absolutely loved him. I know you were heartbroken that Jackson Kirkland did not make this roster, Mon, because all you did was talk about him the first preseason game for 3 hours.
I talked bad about him. He was. I'm sitting there trying to think, like, man, is Jake on medication? I don't remember saying anything good about the guy. I'll tell you this: he was the darling of the undrafted free agents. Pro Football Focus, other Bengal internet Twitter GMs were bashing him, but there was one giving him 80 score, 90 score. Man, you can't make it up. Whatever. It is what it is. I expect him to be on the practice squad. Maybe he puts on some muscle and he gets better, but I thought he was absolutely terrible. But hey, I'm not the offensive line guru. I'm just a guy that watches football.
Well, and he probably will end up on the practice squad, to be honest with you. So you still might get your wish of Jackson Kirkland being on this Bengals 53-man roster. Let's talk about the roster real quick, the 53, Mom, before we talk about potential waiver guys. Obviously, the Bengals keep 2 quarterbacks. What does that tell you, Mom? That tells me that Joe Burrow is ready to rock and roll, something that we both knew. I think everyone kind of felt like, that was going to be the case. So Joe Burrow back in the saddle. Coach Taylor said might not practice this week, but I would be shocked if he wasn't out there next week ready to rock and roll. Running backs, nothing there that nobody was expecting. The Bengals keep 4. Wide receivers, we talked about it. Bengals keep 6. Interesting. Could keep potentially 7, bringing Morgan back. We'll see how that all pans out. Tight ends, the Bengals keep 3. as we talked about in length with Tanner Hudson being the guy, the odd man out there. Offensive line, Mon, the Bengals keep 10. Adeniji ends up being the guy out there. The Bengals keep Trey Hill and Deontay Smith, two guys along with Jackson Carman, who probably are on a bubble, I would think. I would think those three guys probably have a very short leash when it comes to the NFL and this 53-man roster. So going to be very interesting to see what happens with those three guys there in that offensive line room. Defensive line, again, like you said, the Bengals go 5-5. Osai probably going to hopefully not, but I would think something's going to get moved with Osai here in the next day or two, which means Miles Murphy has got to step up and play football, right, Mom? And this is a guy that Bengals used the first-round pick on. He's got to be ready to play right now. I mean, he's going to have to be ready to go if Joseph Osai can't. Jay Tuafeli, again, I agree with you. I think Jay Tuafeli here is the odd one. Very surprised with that. Not that he's not a good player, but I think maybe the pass rush a little bit more important right now with the injury to Osai. Joe Bocci, the linebackers look the same. Again, I thought Joe Bocci was going to make this 53-man, and I'm glad he did. I think he's a big-time special teams player. And then we look at the DBs, Mon, and we got 10 of them, 6-4, 6 corners, 4 safeties. I'll give you credit again where credit is due. I'm always going to do that, Mon. I'm always going to give you credit where credit is due. You called DJ Ivey making this roster, and he did. The guy could be a special player for us. So there you go. That's really how this roster number-wise pans out. Obviously, we all know the three amigos there in the special teams room with McPherson, Robbins, and Adamitis. So what do you think, Mon, about this 53-man roster?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it pretty much on the head. A couple things. They went heavy at the offensive line. I picked 9 last week's show. They have 10 right now. I personally think the 53rd man on the Bengals roster right now is Cody Ford and or this backup center Trey Hill. I think if they find a player on the waiver wire that they are able to claim, one of those two will be gone to make room for that gentleman right there. Tuafele, to me, it came down between him and Raymond Johnson. If they find a defensive end, depending on what happens with Osai tomorrow, if Osai does go on IR designations of return, that opens up a spot. Raymond Johnson's coming back in right there to be on the active roster. Again, if they find another person on the waiver wire that they have to make room for, going 10 on the defensive line, I could see Tuafele potentially getting released to make room for that. I'm happy with it. I mentioned this earlier in the show. 10 defensive backs, 6 of them are either rookie or second year players. Very young defensive backfield. We do have some veterans up there, but let's face it, NFL teams play with more. I mean, cornerback 5, cornerback 6, they play a lot of snaps in the NFL. So you can expect DJ Ivey, DJ Turner, some of these young players, they're going to Tyson Anderson, they're going to be out there on the field. And when that happens, NFL teams aren't stupid. They are going to target these players, and Lou Anarumo has to be ready for it, and I think he will be. Speaking of the pass rush, you mentioned we need Miles Murphy to really turn it up a notch. I don't know if he just doesn't look as explosive as I expected him to be coming out of Clemson being a first-round pick. He obviously has a lot of talent. Hopefully that light bulb comes on and he gives us some pass rush. Compare him, Jake, to what Raymond Johnson did in the preseason and, what the first-round pick did. I mean, Johnson he was an animal. He was unblockable. And I'd just like to see that come out of our first-round pick, and I think it will eventually. Overall, I'm really happy. It's a deep roster. It's a good roster. It's a Super Bowl roster. The Bengals are really young. Remember, the Chiefs are really young in the backfield, defensive backfield last year. They had 4 rookies play throughout the year for them. They ended up making the Super Bowl. But I think this is a good roster. I think the coaching staff did a good job. And like I said, it's going to continue to evolve over these next few days.
I agree. And I will say this, Mon. I think that First of all, I'm going to say I disagree with you about who that 53 man is. Right, there's no way that Cody Ford is the 53rd man right now. I think you got to throw Jackson Carman in there before you throw Cody Ford. I think Jackson Carman is on the bubble. I agree, along with Trey Hill. I think both of those guys are bubble guys. Do you think, Mon, that there's anybody out there right now, or even maybe a position that you think the Bengals might go after? Are we going to see any kind of deals like that Billy Price, BJ Hill deal? Are we going to see any deals like that here in the next couple of days? Because we've seen a lot of them on Twitter today, where teams are going out and trading for guys. Are the Bengals in that market, do you think, or are they going to roll with what they have and see what happens?
I'm sure they're always looking. Like I said, Tuafale has flashed for the Bengals. He played really well for them last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they're maybe shopping him or a player like that. Uh, I think they're going to look at tight end. They're going to look at quarterback. A lot of good young quarterbacks were released. The deal is this: your quarterback has to be ready to come in and play immediately. How realistic is it to bring in a guy from Will Greer, who I like? I'm a West Virginia fan. He's a great player. Is he going to come in 10 days and know the Bengals offense? That's not realistic. So that's where I think Jake Browning is safe. But if there's that special player out there, maybe the Bengals will try to get him and just roll the dice and see how that goes. Interior defensive line. Well, I mentioned Tuafale. The Bengals always look at defensive linemen, interior offensive line. If there's a guard out there, somebody that's really solid, that's available, I can see the Bengals potentially putting in a claim for them. But to me, the big one is tight end and quarterback right now.
Okay, and I agree. I agree, but I think Tanner Hudson. I think the Bengals already have a tight end. I'm not going to get back into the Tanner Hudson deal, but for us Bengal fans that were tight end hungry for the draft, man, oh man, I don't understand it. But real quick, Mom, before we go, I know you weren't able to see with your work schedule today from the jungle the new behind the scenes Bengals show. I don't know what you want to call it, Mon. It's one of the greatest things I've ever watched. You've got to watch, Mon, tonight. When we go off the air, you've got to watch From the Jungle. It is absolutely incredible. Kudos to this Bengals organization and everybody behind the scenes. Once again, this Bengals organization, Mon, is knocking it out of the park when it comes to the media and the whether it's social media or the pictures, the film, everything that this Bengals creative staff is doing behind the scenes. This From the Jungle thing, Mon, is just incredible. If you guys have not watched it, I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but we will definitely talk about it on the next show. It is incredible, Mon. Wait till you watch it. I cannot wait till you watch it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to watch it tonight. Twitter is a buzz about it. Everybody is just really
so good,
talking
Mon.
it up.
Oh.
So we're going to watch it. And 1 week closer to football, I guess next week's show, we're going to preview that Browns game, correct?
It's game on now, baby. You know what I mean? It's game on. It is the season has begun. It's very, very exciting. This was again a situation, Mon, I think, where the Bengals went in and really tried to give us fans a bigger part of this organization like they've done here this last 2 years. And I just can't wait till you watch it, Mon. They knocked this show out of the park. Bengals Browns, Mon. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good one, and we will talk about it on next week's show. That's another edition of the Bengals Pulse. As always, guys, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Hopefully you did like it. If you did, make sure you give Mon and I that 5-star review. We very much appreciate that. Check us out on all the awesome podcast platforms: Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. As always, follow him at The Fire Mon on Twitter. Follow me at Coach Jake Owens 9 on Twitter as well. And follow the Bengals Pulse, Bengals_Pulse 9. And then on Instagram, the same without the @ Bengals_Pulse 9. As always, check out all the awesome podcasts right here on the Wincinnati Podcast Network. Mon, I think you and I are going to be teaming up with the rest of the Wincinnati family and doing a preview show. I cannot wait till that comes out here very soon. He is Maan. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse. Hoo day, Bengal fans. We will see you soon.
See ya.